Hello, welcome back to my bookshelf. Who am I? I am the BookTube Goddess, the #1 drag queen booktuber on YouTube. And guess what? This is our last unboxing video. I believe this is video number 17, where I go through the boxes in my garage that have had books in storage forever and unbox them and share them with you. And I just had so many, and we are finally at the end. So let's groove down memory lane and open up the first box. Now I have 3 smallish medium-sized boxes, and this is the biggest of the 3, and I believe they are filled with paperbacks, so let's dive right in. The first book is Frostheart by Jamie Littler. This was recommended by Gavin of How to Train Your Gavin, and I believe I read it to one of his readathons. They are probably too young for adult readers. I know some middle grades are great for adult readers. I wouldn't put this one among them, but if you are middle grade age or know someone who is, it's probably a wonderful little adventure of a boy who lives in this frozen waste. It's heavily illustrated. The illustrations are really quite delightful, and tells the story of a young orphan who has a found family, but is also looking for magic in this world, which is in the form of a song, which I believe is outlawed. So a lot of layers. Highly recommend for middle grade aged readers. And our next book is Across the Face of the World by Russell Kirkpatrick. I believe I got this whole series, but I don't believe it was really one of my favorites. And I really don't remember any details at all, so take that for what you will. Next we have Piers Anthony for Love of Evil. This is the series he wrote called The Incarnations of Mortality. Now, I believe there are 8 books, 7 or 8 books in this series, and they each tell the exact same story from the viewpoint of one of these incarnations. I know if we've been talking about the Sandman, like there's dream, desire, death. In this world, there seems like evil and good and nature. And it just got too repetitive to me. I didn't finish the series. And this is book 6, so I got pretty darn far in it, and I just gave up. It was just too repetitive, too boring. If you want to check out Piers Anthony, I would suggest the Blue Adept series or the first 3 books of the Xanth series. Next we have Stephen King, The Wolves of Calla, which is part of the Dark Tower series, which you know I love. I don't understand why these books are so oddly sized. Maybe they just didn't want them thick, so they made them taller. You can compare it to another paperback. They're a good maybe inch taller than a normal paperback. Needless to say, if you haven't heard me talk about this before, I think The Dark Tower is a great modern contemporary fantasy, portal fantasy. I would not say it's a horror novel like his other horror novels. The next book is Ender's Game by Orson Scott Card. I did a whole video on Orson Scott Card, and I won't go into that anymore, but I will say that I do consider this to be a classic science fiction work, regardless of what I think of the man. Next we have Jack L. Chalker's The Wonderland Gambit. You've seen me pull out a lot of Jack Chalker before. This is, I assume, a sort of a psychedelic trip, world of warped reality, nothing could be trusted. I just really enjoy Chalker's work, best known for Will of Worlds. Next up is Holly Lyle, Vengeance of Dragons, Book 2 of the Secret Text. This is another writer that never really took off and should have. If you are a writer, I know she has a lot of resources on her website. I believe she's indie publishing now, but really good writer. Really great prose, really fun stories. Next we have Steven Erikson, The Bone Hunters. And I know I've talked a lot about this before because there's a lot of books to pull, but I did not complete the series. The series got too dense and it was just too much for me to get through. But I still maintain it's super well written and some of the best world building I've ever read, and highly recommend at least the first 3 books. But again, for me, I just couldn't get through it. It just got too much for me. But take that for what you will. Next up is Dreams of Steel by Glenn Cook. I believe this is one of the standalone Black Company novels. It still has the characters we're used to. Really recommend you start with the first 3 novels, which starts with Black Company. And then if you want to continue, you can. But if you like anti-hero books, you're going to love the Black Company books. Next we have 2 books by Gail Martin. Chronicles of the Necromancer. I don't remember this at all. Obviously, I was enjoying it enough that I completed the trilogy. It's just, I don't remember the story. But I do like these covers. Next up is an anthology. My favorite fantasy story. What do today's top fantasy writers read? Okay, so this is kind of cool. They have a list of authors, and these authors have selected their favorite short stories, and they're put in this wonderful anthology. It is edited by Martin Greenberg. So just to get an idea of the types of stories we have, Tanya Huff chose a story by Charles DeLint. Robert Silverberg chose a story by Jack Vance. We have Terry Pratchett choosing a story by L. Sprang de Camp. Neil Gaiman choosing a story by R.A. Lafferty. It's really a neat concept. I don't know if they've done more volumes of this, but check out my favorite fantasy story. And we have Storm Constantine, The Enchantments of Flesh and Spirit. Talk about this a lot on my channel too. It is the Rathru series about these goth, gay, punk, queer sensibilities of this wonderful writer named Storm Constantine. And it probably appeals strongly to gay teens. I know it did to me, but if you're interested in sort of this wild, dystopian, sexual, queer world building, check out Storm Constantine's Rathru series. And we have a Chronicles of Prydean novel. This is The High King, Lloyd Alexander. Don't really recommend this unless you're really into middle grade history, because it did win the Newbery Award, but the writing's pretty dated. And you've probably read a ton of other stories inspired by the Arthurian legend that you don't need to pick up this one. But it was made into an animated series called The Black Cauldron. And we have a hardback, Holidays on Ice by David Sedaris. I assume this is a gift. It's David Sedaris does humorous essays. Next we have Haruki Murakami, Hard-Boiled Wonderland. Japanese author, highly recommend. Next we have The Doom That Came to Sarnath and Other Stories by H.P. Lovecraft. And I've talked about Lovecraft enough on this channel that you may know that I actually prefer books and stories inspired by Lovecraft rather than Lovecraft's own writing. There are some exceptions, but if you're into cosmic horror, you've got to read a few stories by the man who invented it. And I believe these are in public domain. Someone correct me. But I know you can find them online, and if you just want to read a story for free. Next we have Travels with My Aunt by Graham Greene. Now I got this book because one of my favorite movies of all times is Travels with My Aunt with Maggie Smith. It was done in the 70s. So I wanted to check out the book to see what the book was like. And I enjoyed the movie more. The book just did not have the charm that I felt was in the movie. But it's basically a young man traveling with his estranged aunt and finding out about her sordid past. And in this book, there's like this CIA subplot that's not in the movies. I would recommend the movie over reading the book. Surprise. Next we have Death House Gates by Stephen Erickson. Again, this is a Malazan novel, which I've talked about previously. Next we have How to Become a Virgin by Quentin Crisp. He is the author of The Naked Civil Servant. And if you're into queer history, his memoir, starting with The Naked Civil Servant, has one of the most remarkable writing voices you'll ever hear. And it tells about his life being a queer man in the 40s and 50s. Not just being a queer man, but being out and flamboyant and super effeminate. Quentin Crisp became a fascinating personality. I did a whole video about him. I'll put him up here. Next we have another anthology, Year's Best Fantasy, edited by David Hartwell. Includes Terry Goodkin, Nicola Griffith, George R.R. Martin, Robert Sheckley, Michael Stanwyck. So what year is this? Okay, this is 2001. Next we have Knights of the Black Earth by Margaret Weiss and Don Perrin. You probably know Margaret Weiss from the Dragonlance books, but she did team up with another co-author, Don Perrin, to write these science fiction novels heavily inspired by Star Wars. Next up are two books by Karen Miller. This is one of my favorite fantasy series ever. It's called the Godspeaker Trilogy. These are the first two books of the trilogy. The first book is my absolute favorite. It is a dark, dark anti-hero story of the Empress, of a young woman who has a very tough life and rises up to be Empress. And she is not likable at all, but I still found myself rooting for her. Now, the second book, The Riven Kingdom, is about a princess who rises up in power. And the third book is when these two meet and go to war. So it's a great trilogy, but again, my favorite is the Empress. And if you're looking for anti-hero, you can't get better than this. Next we have Aragon by Christopher Paolini. This is the first book of the Aragon series, and it doesn't break any new ground, but it's remarkable because the writer wrote this when he was just a teenager and got it published. Wow. And next up is Police by Philip K. Dick. Short book. I believe this is probably a novella. And I believe it's about a detective. Yes, it's about a schizophrenic detective named Horselover Fat. Philip K. Dick is one of those authors that has inspired so many other authors, and you should read a few of his stories just to find out why. And last in my box is Mary Poppins. Yes, I have a box set of Mary Poppins books by P.L. Travers, and these are very different than the Disney series. But I find them really fun to read just in terms of seeing the history and evolution of middle grade writing. So if you're interested, go ahead and just take a spoonful of sugar and check out Mary Poppins. Okay, guess what? I lied. I'm not going to be able to get through the next two boxes. I am just beat. Just going through this one box drained me. So lucky for you, there's going to be another unboxing video. I don't know when it will be or when I'll release it. But if you like this video, go ahead and give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel and do all those booktubey things. Until we meet again, may all the books you read be blessed.